You really can't avoid it these days, can you? Scrolling online, seeing article after article about AI, artificial intelligence,
It's everywhere.
and for years, we heard about automation, factory floors, that kind of thing. But now the buzz seems to be shifting, hitting closer to home for many of us. Office jobs, white-collar work.
Exactly. What does AI actually mean for those roles? That's the big question.
Are our jobs really about to be, well, totally changed?
That's precisely what we're digging into today. We got a fantastic suggestion from a listener, a report from the Pew Research Center. It really takes a detailed look at how AI might impact white-collar jobs, specifically here in the U.S.
Okay, so Pew Research. This is solid data we're talking about, not just guesswork. What's our main goal here? What do we want you, our listener, to take away from this deep dive?
Well, the mission today is really unpack this data. We want to understand which white-collar jobs have the highest, let's say, exposure to AI right now,
Exposure, okay.
and clarify what that really means, for your actual work, your career path down the line.
Right, so they didn't just guess. They looked at different jobs and sort of rated how much AI could potentially change things. How did they manage that?
They use a really great resource. It's called ONET. You can think of it like a huge database of jobs.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that.
It details all the different tasks and activities for hundreds, actually over 1,000 occupations. Experts have rated how important 41 different work activities are for each job.
Okay.
And Pew took those 41 activities and basically grouped them by how likely AI is to either help out significantly or maybe even replace that activity. They used high, medium, and low exposure categories.
That seems like a smart approach, focusing on the tasks, not just job titles. So what did they find overall? How many people are actually in these high-exposure jobs?
The big headline finding from 2022 data is that about 19% of American workers are in jobs considered to have the highest exposure to what current AI can do.
19%. Almost 1 in 5. That feels pretty significant.
It is.
What about the other end? The jobs least likely to be touched by AI? For now, at least.
Interestingly, slightly more workers, about 23%, were in jobs with the lowest exposure. The core tasks there just aren't things AI is good at right now.
Okay.
But the majority, nearly 60%, are somewhere in that middle, medium exposure category.
So it's not like everyone's job is about to vanish tomorrow.
Sure.
But still, that 19%, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Who tends to be in that high exposure group? Are there patterns?
Oh, definitely. Some very clear patterns. One really striking thing is the link between education and exposure. Get this. 27% of workers who have a bachelor's degree or more are in these highly exposed jobs.
Wow, 27%. How does that compare to folks with, say, just a high school diploma?
Much lower, only about 12% for those with a high school education.
So maybe not what people would guess, right?
Mhm.
You often hear about automation hitting less educated workers hardest.
Yeah.
This kind of flips that a bit for AI.
It really does. It shows how current AI is particularly adept at tasks involving complex information processing, analysis, things often central to jobs needing higher education. We also see a slight difference based on gender. Women show slightly higher exposure, 21%, compared to 17% for men.
And why is that?
It seems to be mostly down to the types of jobs women are more likely to hold currently in the workforce.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about the job roles themselves. What about different racial or ethnic groups? Did the study look at that?
Yes, it did. It found that Asian workers at 24% and white workers at 20% generally had higher exposure rates compared to black workers who are at 15% and Hispanic workers at 13%.
And again, that's likely tied to the distribution of different groups across various occupations, right?
Right.
Not anything inherent.
Exactly. It reflects the kinds of tasks common in the jobs typically held by different groups.
Got it.
And one more piece of the puzzle. Pay. Higher pay often goes hand in hand with higher AI exposure.
Really?
Yeah. In 2022, the average hourly wage for those high exposure jobs was around $33. For the least exposed jobs, it was closer to $20.
Okay, so let's get more specific. These high exposure activities, what are we actually talking about? What does someone in one of these jobs do all day?
Well, according to the ONET data Pew used, high exposure activities are things like getting information, analyzing data or information, working with computers, very information-centric tasks.
Right, you see how AI fits there. What jobs are good examples?
Think about judicial law clerks, maybe web developers, analyzing info, coding, processing complex material that's core to their work.
Okay, yeah, that clicks. Lots of screen time, lots of data. So on the other side, what are the low exposure activities? What kind of work seems safer for now?
Low exposure activities tend to involve more, direct human interaction, maybe physical presence, emotional intelligence kind of things,
Like,
like assisting and caring for others or performing general physical activities. The study points to nannies as an example. Direct care, physical interaction, AI isn't really there yet.
right, the human touch still matters a lot in those roles.
Mm.
Can you give us another compare and contrast using those importance ratings you mentioned? High versus low exposure jobs.
Sure. Let's take mechanical drafters. They're flagged as high exposure. For them, the average importance rating of those high exposure AI friendly activities is about 3.28, but the rating for low exposure human centric activities is only 2.36.
So the stuff AI is good at is more important for their job.
Exactly. Now flip that for nannies, a low exposure example. For them, the high exposure activities average only 2.36 in importance. But
Yeah.
the low exposure activities, the caring, assisting ones, they rate higher at 3.03.
Those numbers really paint a picture, don't they? The different focus in different roles. Okay, so given all this potential change swirling around, how are workers feeling? People in those high exposure fields, are they like freaking out?
This was one of more surprising findings in the Q survey. Workers in industries with higher AI exposure actually tend to be more optimistic about it.
More optimistic. Huh. How so?
Well, take the information and technology sector, for instance. 32% of workers there said they think AI will help them personally more than it hurts.
Okay.
Only 11% thought it would hurt more than help.
Why do you think that is? More optimism where the exposure is highest.
It's possible, maybe, that people already working closely with technology can see its potential more clearly. They might see it as a tool to automate the boring stuff, freeing them up for more interesting strategic work, perhaps.
That's a really interesting thought, seeing it as an assistant, maybe, rather than just a threat. So putting this all together, what skills should people listening be thinking about to, navigate this?
Well, the data suggests that analytical skills are really key in those higher exposure jobs. We're talking critical thinking, strong writing skills, maybe some science and math grounding.
Right, the thinking skills.
Whereas mechanical skills like fixing equipment, maintenance, those tend to be more important in the lower exposure roles.
So sharpening your ability to think critically, analyze information, seems like a good bet generally.
Definitely seems that way.
And how common is AI use in businesses right now? Is it everywhere already?
Not quite everywhere yet. The data Pew cited from 2020 showed that overall, very few U.S. businesses, less than 3%, reported using advanced AI.
Oh, it seems low.
But the catch is, those tended to be larger companies, and those large companies employ a pretty big chunk of the workforce, maybe 11% to 16% of all U.S. employment.
Okay. So while it's not every company, its impact is concentrated in places that employ a lot of people.
That seems to be the picture, yeah. Early stages of broad adoption, but already significant in larger organizations.
Okay. So we've covered a lot: who's exposed, what kinds of tasks, how people feel. What's some straightforward, actionable advice for our listeners based on all this? What steps can you take?
Okay, a few things. First, really focus on building up those analytical and critical thinking skills. They're valuable pretty much everywhere, AI or no AI.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, commit to being a lifelong learner. Technology changes fast, even if your job feels safe today. Staying adaptable, learning about new tools, it's just smart career management.
Good advice. Keep learning.
And finally, maybe try to reframe it slightly. Instead of just worrying about replacement, think, how could AI help me? Could it take over tedious tasks? Free me up for more valuable work.
Right, so be proactive.
Mm.
Focus on the human skills, the critical thinking, the adaptability, and look for ways AI can be a tool, not just a replacement.
Exactly. That seems to be the constructive way forward.
So wrapping this up, the main message isn't really mass unemployment for white-collar workers overnight. It's more complex than that.
It really is. AI is going to keep changing how we work, no doubt,
Mhm.
especially for jobs heavy on information processing, data analysis. But that change looks like a mix, some tasks being augmented, made easier by AI, and yes, some potential for displacement too. It's not all one thing.
It definitely gives you a lot to chew on. And it makes you wonder, thinking ahead, how will this change what employers even look for? What skills become really valuable in a world where AI does more of the routine analytical
It's
stuff?
a million-dollar question, isn't it?
Something for all of us to think about, I suppose, as we watch this tech continue to evolve. It's certainly not slowing down.